Hello, my name is Bonventure and this is Moving Pictures Kenya. Today, I want us to look at this proposed tax on diaspora remittances. For those of you who have been following the news in the recent past, a bill was passed, I think it was in the USA House of Representatives. If you go into that bill, there is a provision about taxing diaspora remittances. Previously, there was no tax on diaspora remittances. So this is what the bill talks about. This particular provision is in section 112,105 and it talks about excise tax on remittance transfers. This provision imposes a 5% excise tax on remittance transfers which will be paid by the sender with respect to such transfers. The provision requires that the tax be collected by the remittance transfer providers, and the remittance transfer providers are responsible for remitting such tax quarterly to the Secretary of the Treasury. The provision also makes it clear that remittance transfer providers have secondary liability for any tax that is not paid at the time that the transfer is made. The provision also creates an exception for remittance transfers that are sent by verified U.S. citizens or U.S. nationals by way of qualified remittance transfer providers. Qualified remittance transfer providers are defined as remittance transfer providers that enter into a written agreement with the Secretary of the Treasury to verify the remittance transfer senders as U.S. citizens or U.S. nationals. The provision also provides a refundable tax credit for any excise taxes required to be paid by taxpayers with valid social security numbers. Lastly, the provision also has an anti-conduit rule. So clearly, as you can see, this is something that was not existing. It's a new law that is being introduced. Now, according to the bill, this particular tax is supposed to be 5% of all remittances out of the USA. So for those people who are used to sending money back home to their respective countries, then know that every time you send money out of the USA, you will incur a 5% tax. The other thing you need to note about this bill is that this tax will be collected by the remitting entity. So like for example, if you are using SendWave to send money wherever you are sending, then SendWave will retain 5% of the money you are sending out. So the person whom you are sending the money to will receive 5% less. So like for example, if you are South African living in the USA and you want to send money maybe to Mpumalanga or maybe to Gauteng, then when you go to send money, if you are sending like $100, it means the person in Gauteng will receive $95. The $5 will be retained by the remitting agency. Now, when you look further into this bill, it states that this remitting agency, like for example, if you are using a SendWave, so SendWave will retain this money and submit it to the Treasury Secretary at the end of every quarter. So it means they'll collect it over a period of time. A quarter is 3 months. So they'll collect it over a period of 3 months, and at the end of 3 months, they send the money to the Treasury Secretary. Another thing you need to know about this bill is that it is affecting non-USA citizens. So if you are a USA citizen, you will not incur this tax whenever you are sending money out of the country. But if you are not a USA citizen, then anytime you send money out of the country, you must incur this tax. I think the proponents of this tax are trying to curb the problem of illegal immigrants who send money back home through this particular proposed law. So then, the question is, what are the effects of this bill around the world? And the truth is that this bill or this particular tax will have huge effects around the world because many countries have their citizens living in the USA, working here and sending money back home to their countries. There are countries like, for example, in the Caribbean region, countries like Jamaica, countries like Mexico, the Dominican Republic. Some of them, their GDP is financed like 20% by diaspora remittances. So it means when you impose this tax, then that 20% will be heavily affected. So this means that citizens of these countries should be prepared for higher taxes, because such governments may be required to increase their taxes or to introduce a particular tax that will cover the void that will be left by this 5% that has been picked from the diaspora remittances. Last year, I attended an event in Washington whereby the Kenyan ambassador to the USA was talking about how diaspora remittances from the USA form a huge chunk of the money that goes to Kenya. I think he was talking about 56% of the diaspora remittances are from the USA. Those of you who have been following events in the media recently, this particular tax, Indians have an outcry about it, because Indians, I think they form a third of the people who remit money from the diaspora. So with this particular tax, then it means remittances back home to India will be affected. Then of course in Africa, countries like Kenya, countries like Nigeria, countries like Egypt will also be heavily affected. You may wonder why this particular law. For those of you who followed the USA elections last year, now President Trump made so many promises during the campaigns. Like for example, one of the promises was no tax on tips. So this means if there is no tax on tips, then the US Treasury will receive less because tips are not being taxed. So it means that a way has to be found to fill that particular void that will be created by there being no tax on tips. So this particular bill, it is called the One Big Beautiful Bill, proposes that there will be no tax on tips for certain categories of people. I don't have those categories, but I think mostly it will be hotel workers, those who work in the hospitality industry, and then those who work in law enforcement. So I expect so many people to start working overtime, because the overtime money will not be taxed. And remember, when you work overtime, you are paid 1.5 times. So like for example, if you are working for $10 an hour, when you work overtime, it means you'll get $15. So it means this $15 will be tax-free. So I'm sure many people will now opt for overtime. But apart from that, Trump has also promised to build a dome, an iron dome like that one that is in Israel. But here they are calling it the Golden Dome. Although I'm not a tax expert, but I expect this bill to have several implications. The first implication will be for the remitting companies. That means that they'll have to put structures and systems in place to collect this particular tax. So that they will be heavily impacted. Most likely they'll have to change their infrastructure or improve on their infrastructure or improve on their systems in order to manage this particular change. The other impact would be on those people remitting money out of the USA. Definitely many people don't like paying taxes. So I expect that diaspora remittances will go down, because people will now avoid paying these taxes. And when they go down, it means those particular countries where these particular diaspora remittances go to will start suffering, because incomes for certain governments will go down. Remember, like in the Caribbean, I told you like 20% of the GDP is financed by diaspora remittances. Then when diaspora remittances go down, it means the operations of those particular governments will be affected. So therefore, they will have to look for other ways of raising money. It may be through introducing other taxes, or it may be through enforcing their existing tax laws so that they collect more. So there will be a ripple effect there. Now the other impact I expect would be at the internal revenue services. Here in the USA, the tax authorities are called internal revenue services. So they manage all the taxes, and it means they'll have to have a way of managing this particular tax. So most likely they'll have to make changes in their systems in order to manage this tax, and then I expect that maybe at the end of the year, when people are filing their tax returns, most likely there will be a particular form that will be given to people from the remitting companies, like for example Sendwave. So this particular form, you will use it together with your tax returns to show that you complied with this particular rule or this particular tax anytime you send money out of the country. So I expect that particular change. And then of course, for the US authorities, they expect to collect more money. So income to the US government will increase by a certain percentage because of this diaspora remittance tax. But then some other analysts expect that this particular tax will have what they call like a zero-sum effect, because it's like taking from one hand and giving out in the other hand. So their point of argument is this: this money will be collected by the US government. Since it will have ripple effect in some countries, then the US government will have to support those particular countries through foreign aid. So they expect, yes, USA will collect more money through tax, but again, it will give out more money through financial aid. But we wait to see how that will be effected. That is it for today. My name is Bonventure. In case there is any other change, I will let you know. Thank you.